Oh, why, hello there. I didn't see you. I assume you were in my presence to hear of the tragic fall of Rome. Let's take a visit into my time machine, shall we? And take a trip to the beginning of the end. Rome, the foundation of our society today. It grew into a vast empire quickly from the beginning. It all started in an epic fashion according to the myth in which two quarreling brothers by the name of Romulus and Remus fought to the death. In the end, Romulus was victorious, and he was founded the great city of Rome, named after him. Rome was quickly spread across the width of the Mediterranean Sea. But now, we switch to a different story, the story of how Rome fell. Rome, 406 AD. The barbarian tribes had begun to advance onto Roman soil. The Roman legions had begun to evacuate Britannia, and the Anglo-Saxons are destroying the opposition. The ruthless savages raided, pillaged, and dismantled Roman villages. They stole, killed, and had no mercy for the helpless Romans. Children and women were hardly spared, and the Roman legions were struggling to fight against them. Too much money was being filtered into the army, leaving Rome's other problems out to dry. What caused all this trouble to happen to Rome? Who was behind all this? Why couldn't Rome fight back? One reason of all these battles were caused because of one man, Attila the Hun.
Attila the Hun and his bloodthirsty barbarians tortured, raped, and murdered all who stood in their way. According to legend, they dipped their arrows in the juice of boiled embryos, drank women's blood, and were descended from unclean spirits. Attila's ruthlessness knew no bounds.
Attila was a ruthless leader, and he led his Eurasian warriors across northern Europe, terrorizing and conquering. This pushed many Germanic tribes towards Rome, where they were accepted but treated with extreme cruelty. The Romans even went as far as making Goths exchange their children for dog meat. This caused mass rebellion, and the barbarians began to pester the frightened Roman legions.
The barbarian tribes were truly punishing.
Germanic tribes pillaged and killed and assassinated the Eastern Emperor Valens in 378 AD. By 410, things were looking grim for Western Rome, and they eventually fell many years later in 476 AD. When Roman Emperor Romulus was killed by the barbarian king Odoacer, who eventually became an emperor of the region, Rome had expanded too much to be able to defend it all, and the legions were weakening with every lost battle. Plague, famine, earthquakes, these were three things that pestered Rome throughout the long 4th and 5th centuries. Although many lives were lost due to the disgusting and treacherous barbarians, plagues and natural disasters such as these were what really killed people. Plague has been around a long time and many times has been seen as a form of biological warfare. Biological warfare dates back to the Yuan dynasty when the Mongols would catapult plague victims into the city. It is unknown whether the Vandals and Goths and other Germanic tribes were the main source of the disease, but historians are sure that they brought at least some plagues to Rome. As explained before, the Romans were under too much attack to deal with other issues, specifically the economy. Rome's economy relied heavily on slave labor to grow their crops and to work as laborers and craftsmen. With all their soldiers sent off to defend against the Huns, Rome had nobody to go off and conquer new land and bring in more slaves. Workers were fleeing to the countryside, trying to escape the flaming terror that was sweeping their empire. Of course, this sparked a financial crisis throughout all of Rome, and it didn't help that Vandals began to stop all trade in and out with their pirate techniques. If Rome's massive size and vast borders wasn't enough to bring down the empire politically, then the corrupt government forming was. Being emperor of Rome is sketchy as it is, but the turmoiled 2nd and 3rd century made the position lethal. This led the empire to civil war. Among this time, 20 different emperors had stood above Rome. All were killed within a 75-year span. This political injustice took over the Senate as well, which failed to help lead the emperors out of corruption. At one point, the Praetorian Guards killed emperors for their own gain and had even auctioned off the role of emperor. People's civic pride had fluttered. With Christianity making its way through the empire after it became legalized in 313 by the Edict of Milan, many Roman values were tossed aside, especially after it became the state religion. Some argue that this actually played a fairly large part in the fall of Rome. Christianity took away Rome's polytheistic culture, which shifted focus from the glory of the state to a sole figure, or in this case, a messiah. Popes and other church figures started to play roles in politics as well, farther complicating the government and causing more distraught between members of the original government. The western side of Rome was doomed starting right when it was established. Diocletian divided the empire into two halves in the late 3rd century, causing one side to have more power than the other. The western capital was nestled in Milan, and the eastern capital was known as Byzantium, later called Constantinople. Over time, the Eastern Empire floated away from its later half and became more powerful and civilized. The West was slowly falling into a pit of depression. Their economic crisis was too much to handle, and their debts began to pile up. Barbarians had seen how much more defended and strong the Eastern Empire was, and took it as an opportunity to strike down upon the weak western half. The Western Empire finally halted to a stop in the late 5th century. The Eastern Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, flourished until the 14th century, when they fell at the hands of the Ottoman Turks. Some historians consider this the real fall of Rome, but in more eyes it was considered a completely different empire. In the end, Rome drastically shaped the future of our Western civilizations. They left us with art, government, entertainment, architecture, and so much more. Invasion of the barbarian tribes was also one of the most important causes of Rome's fall. All of the other events wouldn't have been so severe or would have never happened if it wasn't for the invasions. The Huns were ruthless killers. They helped destroy Rome by pushing more barbarians into Rome to invade. Also the slave labor. The slave labor, because of their economic troubles, the low amount of workers, made Rome rely on slaves more. Rome was so politically unstable, they had poor leaders, corruption, and the Senate was not getting anywhere. Rome could have kept its power if they were safer with everything they did. The Eastern Empire rose because it was more safe and held more trade cities. Rome couldn't deal with all the plague and farming when they were in the middle of war and economic trouble. In the end, Rome couldn't last.
Shut the fuck up now.
Trying to hide from the cameraman. Xander in the tree over there.
So, saw, dude. Going?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jesus, and this is Dude Perfect.
No.